I never expected a single afternoon in her garden to feel like this, like the air itself had folded around us, heavy with something I couldn't name. She was kneeling by the rose bushes, hands brushing the earth as if coaxing life from it with sheer will. Her hair, streaked with silver, caught the sunlight in strands that shimmered like threads of molten gold. I watched, careful not to make it obvious, as her fingers lingered on the petals, and then, somehow, my gaze lingered there too. "Careful with that one," she murmured, glancing up at me over her shoulder. The tilt of her head, the slight curve of her lips, it wasn't a warning. It was something else, something that made my chest tighten. I stepped closer, trying to appear casual as I reached for the trowel beside her. Our hands brushed, just a fraction of a second, but enough. Enough for her warmth to seep through the thin fabric of my shirt and lodge itself somewhere stubborn in my chest. She didn't pull away. She just held that space, letting the brush linger longer than polite. "I don't want to ruin anything," I said, voice uneven, not sure why I even needed to justify myself. Her laugh was soft, a delicate thing that shook the air between us like wind through leaves. "You're careful enough," she said. Her eyes caught mine again, steady and probing, and I felt exposed without knowing why. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Not when her gaze seemed to trace the edges of me, lingering on places no one else noticed. The scent of her shampoo, or was it the garden itself, hovered around her, warm and inviting. I could feel her shoulder brush against mine as she shifted to reach a higher branch, and my stomach knotted in a way that made every rational thought scatter. "You know," she said softly, voice dropping, almost a whisper, "sometimes I think the garden listens. You can tell its secrets, and it understands." I swallowed, unsure if she meant the flowers or the way my pulse seemed to hammer in my ears. I wanted to answer, to say something clever, something that would make her laugh or at least not notice how flustered I was, but my words dissolved before they left my throat. She leaned back, just a little, and I caught the hint of a smile, something private, just for me. The moment stretched, delicate and fragile, until a sudden sound broke it. A wooden gate creaking, footsteps approaching. Her head snapped toward the noise, and the spell shattered. I stood there, heart still racing, and watched her expression change. Her eyes, once soft and luminous, now flickered with caution. Something unspoken passed between us, a question hanging in the air that neither of us had the courage to answer. And then her sister's voice floated from the path beyond the gate, bright and teasing. "You're the only one who makes me bloom." My head whipped toward her, my gaze catching hers. She froze, half-smile lingering, and the world tilted slightly off its axis. I had no idea what came next, but I knew I didn't want to look away. I couldn't stop thinking about the moment before her sister arrived. The way her hand had hovered over mine for just a heartbeat longer than necessary. The way her eyes had held mine, like she could read something I didn't even understand about myself. I had been careful all my life, careful not to speak too loudly, to fade into corners, to keep feelings tucked away. But around her, all that caution seemed useless. My thoughts betrayed me, turning over the memory of her smile, the curve of her neck, the subtle way her perfume clung to the air even after she moved a few steps away. She shifted in the garden, pulling a stray vine into place. I noticed how her blouse brushed against her skin, how the sunlight caught her hair just so. My hands itched to do something, anything, to bridge the space between us, but I couldn't. Not yet. There was a careful line we weren't supposed to cross. She glanced at me, and I saw something behind her eyes. A shadow, maybe, of past regrets. She had been married once, briefly, and I'd overheard the hushed stories in town, fragments of a life that seemed distant, but left her carrying a quiet vulnerability. That vulnerability made her radiant, but also untouchable, in a way. I cleared my throat. "Do you ever wish the garden would grow faster?" I asked, hoping for casual, failing spectacularly. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "No, that's the point. It takes time. You have to nurture it, let it breathe. Rushing only ruins things." Her gaze lingered, a fraction too long, as if testing me, or herself. Every instinct I had screamed to lean closer, to let the brush of our fingers linger. And yet, she stepped back slightly, giving herself space that somehow made the tension sharper. The distance between us was almost unbearable, and I could feel it pressing against my ribs. Her voice softened. "You've always been observant. I notice how you watch, even when you try not to." Her words made my stomach twist. Did she mean the garden? Or me? I wanted to answer, to speak the truth, that I couldn't stop noticing her. But instead, I swallowed, forcing a casual nod. I just like seeing things grow. The lie was half truth, half wish. A breeze stirred the leaves, carrying the faint scent of roses. She reached for a dropped petal, and our hands brushed again, this time longer. I felt the warmth of her fingers against mine, the soft pressure like an unspoken promise. For a fleeting moment, the garden, the sun, the world itself seemed to shrink, leaving just us suspended in a fragile bubble of shared air, quiet and electric. No words were needed. The glance we exchanged said everything and nothing at once, and I knew that line we weren't supposed to cross had already been drawn, not by fear, but by desire. And as she stepped back to admire her work, her eyes met mine again, and something unspoken passed between us. Acknowledgement. Hesitant, fragile, but undeniable. Something was shifting, quietly, but irreversibly. I was kneeling beside her again, digging gently at the soil, when the breeze shifted and carried the faint laughter of someone approaching. My stomach tensed, and I felt her shift beside me, subtle, almost imperceptible, but I noticed. "Did you hear that?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She tilted her head, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Probably just the gardener next door, or someone's kid," she said, but there was a flicker in her eyes that betrayed her focus. Our hands met again as we reached for the same trowel. This time, neither of us pulled away immediately. Our fingers lingered, brushing along the back of each other's hand. I wanted to close the space, to lean closer, but the memory of what might happen if someone saw us made my chest tighten. Her breath brushed against my shoulder as she leaned slightly forward to examine a plant. I swallowed hard, acutely aware of the nearness of her body, the warmth of her hair against my cheek. My mind screamed at me to pull back, to respect the invisible line, but every instinct in me refused. A sudden ping of her phone broke the moment. She glanced down, fingers trembling slightly as she read a message. I saw her lips pressed together, a fleeting shadow crossing her expression. Guilt, perhaps. Hesitation. Something that mirrored my own tangled feelings. "You're good at this," I said softly, voice uneven. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she shifted closer, her knee brushing mine under the edge of the garden bed. The contact sent a jolt up my spine. Her eyes flicked to mine, searching. There was a question there, unspoken, heavy. I wanted to answer, to admit everything. The way I noticed the curve of her smile, the heat of her glance, the pull I felt toward her, but the words lodged somewhere between my throat and my chest. She let out a breath, soft and almost inaudible. "It's hard to find someone who notices," she murmured. Her gaze dropped to the soil again, but I caught the quick flick of her eyes back to mine. I leaned slightly forward, drawn despite myself, caught in the gravity between us. Our faces were inches apart. I could feel the warmth of her breath, the faint scent of jasmine clinging to her hair. My heart hammered in short, sharp beats, each one daring me to close the distance. And then, just as our lips seemed on the verge of meeting, her phone buzzed again. She straightened, blinking, as if waking from a fragile dream. I cursed the interruption silently, though part of me was relieved. Yet, the tension didn't vanish, it only thickened. We remained close, closer than either of us had dared before. Shoulder brushing shoulder, fingers lingering just a fraction too long, eyes locked in silent acknowledgement. Neither spoke, but the electricity between us was undeniable, a tether pulling us towards something we both knew we weren't ready to name. And yet, I couldn't move away. Not entirely. The garden was quiet again, the world shrinking to just the two of us. I could hear my own heartbeat, rapid and uneven, a reckless drum against my ribs. She was kneeling beside me, her hands brushing soil off her palms, but I couldn't focus on anything but the heat radiating from her, the faint tremor in her fingers as she straightened. "You're always here," I blurted, voice lower than I intended, as if saying it aloud might make it real. My words hung between us, awkward, dangerous. Her eyes flicked up, and I caught that same hesitant, searching look I'd come to crave. I like it when you're around," she admitted, softer than a whisper, yet it struck me harder than any confession I'd ever imagined. The air seemed to shift. My chest tightened. I leaned just a fraction closer, drawn by the gravity between us, and she didn't pull away. My fingers brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, tucking it behind her ear. The warmth of her skin lingered against my hand longer than it should have. I swallowed, aware of every inch of space separating us, and every inch my body wanted to close. "I shouldn't," she murmured, voice trembling, a hint of fear threading through the words. It's complicated." I caught her gaze and shook my head slowly. "I don't care," I whispered, though my own rational mind screamed against it. I wanted her too much to care about rules, whispers, or what anyone else would think. She took a shaky breath and leaned just slightly into my shoulder, a fraction, a tease, a test. The scent of her, soft jasmine, sun-warmed skin, filled my senses. My arm itched to wrap around her, to pull her closer, but I froze, caught between desire and hesitation. "I shouldn't let myself," she started, then paused, the words dying on her lips, as if even speaking them might shatter everything delicate between us. I leaned my forehead just a whisper away from hers. My voice was low, nearly inaudible, brushing her ear as I spoke. "I can't stop thinking about you." Her eyes widened, that fragile hesitation melting into something raw, vulnerable. My hand lingered at her jawline, thumb brushing her cheek. She swallowed, lips parted slightly, breath hitching. The tension in the garden became almost unbearable. A bird chirped somewhere distant, a fleeting reminder that the world existed beyond us, but we were trapped in a bubble of heat and want. Every nerve in my body screamed to cross the line, to close the distance that separated our lips. And then she tilted her head toward mine, just a fraction, as if testing the edge, as if daring me. I could feel her pulse against my chest, the tiniest tremor of her shoulder against mine. My lips hovered just a breath away from hers. The air between us thickened, charged, trembling. Every instinct shouted, "Do it." Every thought screamed, "Wait." And in that suspended moment, on the edge of surrender, her eyes flicked toward the garden gate. A shadow passed, a sound, a presence just beyond us. My heart sank. We were so close, closer than ever. One move, one surrender, and nothing would ever be the same. I thought we had a rhythm, a secret balance in the garden that belonged only to us. But then her voice broke through the quiet, sharp with something I hadn't expected. "I saw him," she said suddenly, looking away, fingers tightening around a spade. My chest tightened before I could even process her words. "Saw who?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but it caught somewhere between disbelief and dread. "My ex in town," she admitted, voice low. "He's been asking questions, watching. I thought you knew." I felt my stomach twist. The safe cocoon of the afternoon we'd been sharing suddenly felt fragile, exposed. I stepped closer instinctively, though part of me wanted to retreat, to leave the air between us untainted. Her shoulder brushed mine as she adjusted her stance, and the contact made my pulse spike, dangerous and delicious. I didn't think it mattered," I said, though my words felt hollow. Every instinct in me wanted to claim her, to protect her, to deny the threat, but reason reminded me that desire alone didn't erase complications. Her gaze flicked up at me, soft and vulnerable, and something unspoken passed between us. Fear mingled with want. She took a hesitant step closer, then another back, a rhythm of push and pull that mirrored my own heart. I could see her jaw tense, her fingers twitching, and I knew she was fighting herself just as fiercely as I was. "I can't ignore it," she whispered, voice trembling. And yet, she trailed off, letting the unsaid hang in the air like smoke. My hand itched to reach for hers, to brush that tension away, and when our fingertips met briefly, the spark was undeniable. She shivered at the contact, a tiny tremor that echoed something deep inside me. I swallowed, keeping my voice low, near her ear. We can't let anyone else decide what this is between us. My words carried more promise than explanation. Her breath hitched as my shoulder brushed hers, closer than necessary, and I could feel the electric pull between us, a line we both wanted to cross, and yet dared not. Her eyes met mine, dark with unshed thoughts, lips parted, the slightest quiver in her bottom lip betraying her composure. I wanted to take her hand, to press my forehead to hers, to whisper everything I was too scared to speak aloud. The danger made the desire sharper, more immediate. And then, for a fleeting heartbeat, she leaned in just slightly, the smallest fraction, testing the space between us. I mirrored her movement, drawn in by the gravity I could no longer resist. Our breaths mingled, and the world outside the garden gate faded to nothing. But the sound of the gate opening, soft, almost imperceptible, pulled us back, a cruel reminder that desire alone couldn't protect us from reality. We froze, inches apart, trembling slightly, aware that everything had changed. Nothing was safe anymore. And yet, neither of us moved away. I reached for her hand again, firm this time, decision unspoken but understood. One choice remained, step forward or step back. The gate had closed behind us with a faint click, the world outside momentarily silenced. I could feel her presence beside me, the subtle warmth radiating from her body, the gentle rise and fall of her breath. Every nerve in me screamed to close the space between us, yet a fraction of caution still held me back. She turned to face me fully, and I caught the way her hands trembled slightly as she rested them on the edge of the garden bench. The sunlight fell across her face in streaks, highlighting the curve of her cheek, the faint glimmer of vulnerability in her eyes. I needed, to tell her everything I felt, but words felt too small, too crude for the tension we'd built. Are we just going to pretend this isn't happening? I whispered, voice low, almost lost in the hum of the garden. Her lips parted, and she swallowed, eyes dropping for a fraction of a second before meeting mine again. I don't want to pretend, she admitted, voice trembling, soft but honest. She took a hesitant step closer, and I mirrored her, the distance between us shrinking to mere inches. My heart hammered, each beat a drum of warning and invitation. Our hands found each other again, fingers intertwining instinctively, fitting together like they had always belonged. I traced the back of her hand with my thumb, slow, deliberate, feeling her shiver beneath my touch. Every brush, every contact was a conversation neither of us needed to speak aloud. I've wanted this, I said, voice dropping even lower, almost against her ear. More than I should admit. Her eyes glistened, a flicker of fear and longing mingling together. She leaned just slightly toward me, and I could feel the pull of her body, the subtle shift of weight that brought our torsos closer. The air between us was thick, warm, saturated with everything we hadn't allowed ourselves to say. I don't want to stop, she whispered, almost inaudible. The sound broke something inside me, the last threads of hesitation unraveling. I cupped her face gently, thumb brushing along her jawline, and she leaned into the touch. Our foreheads met, breaths mingling, the world outside shrinking to the space we occupied together. The choice had been made without words. Desire won over doubt. Fear gave way to surrender. I lowered my lips toward hers slowly, cautiously at first, savoring the infinitesimal distance between us. She tilted her head, and the moment stretched, a fragile, electric pause. And then, finally, we met. The kiss was not perfect, not choreographed, not polite. It was messy, human, full of the weight of months of longing and hesitation. My hand rested lightly against her back, pulling her closer, and she responded in kind, letting herself lean in fully. When we finally parted, barely an inch between us, our foreheads still touching, the garden seemed impossibly still. No words were needed. We understood each other fully. Every hesitation, every stolen glance, every lingering touch, the entire story of us, was crystallized in that moment. And yet, as we remained like that, suspended between breaths, I knew one thing with clarity. Nothing would ever be the same again. The garden had grown quiet again, bathed in the soft glow of late afternoon sunlight. We sat side by side on the worn wooden bench, fingers still intertwined, the warmth of her hand pressing into mine. The world outside no longer mattered. Every fear, every hesitation that had haunted us, every whisper of doubt about age, perception, or timing, felt distant, almost absurd now. She leaned her head gently against my shoulder, and I felt the subtle weight of her, the soft exhale of her breath against me. I traced small circles on her hand with my thumb, a silent promise that I was here, fully present, fully hers. She tilted her head slightly, brushing a loose strand of hair from my forehead, and I caught the warmth in her gaze, a quiet affirmation of everything we had discovered together. "I never imagined this," she murmured, voice soft, tinged with wonder. "Not like this." "Neither did I admitted, pressing my forehead to hers, feeling the familiar pulse of her heartbeat against my own. "But it's real, and I'm not letting go." She smiled then, small and hesitant at first, then growing as she leaned into me fully. The tension that had defined every stolen glance, every brush of fingertips, melted into something calm, steady, and deeply human. We didn't need words to fill the space. The intimacy of shared silence, of proximity and warmth, said more than any sentence could. The age between us, once an invisible barrier, was just another detail now, insignificant compared to the connection we had nurtured through hesitation, fear, and quiet longing. We fit together in ways that felt inevitable, not rushed, not forced. Her hand rested on mine, thumb brushing in slow, tender circles, and I felt the vulnerability we had both carried ease into trust, into something lasting. I leaned back slightly, letting her adjust beside me, and for the first time, the garden felt like it was ours, not just a backdrop for tension, but a witness to the story we had written together. Her head rested against my shoulder, her hair brushing my cheek, and I breathed her in, finally allowing myself to settle into the reality I had longed for in secret. "I could stay here forever," she whispered, eyes closing briefly, a quiet sigh of contentment escaping her lips. "Then let's," I said simply, holding her closer. "We have forever now." We sat like that, shoulder to shoulder, fingers entwined, letting the sunlight drape over us in warm patterns. There were no interruptions, no rushing moments, only the soft, steady rhythm of two people finally allowed to exist together without hesitation. And in that moment, I knew we had found something rare and real, a love that had weathered hesitation, fear, and desire, and come out on the other side stronger, tender, and wholly ours. 23.